Alrighty, so my name is Eric Valdez, and I'm here today to explain to you the tension, the heightened level of tension which existed between the U.S. and USSR, and further explain the notion of how it was actually a very heated time period. The high level of tension between the U.S. and USSR was at the core of a polarized world which emerged from World War II. I studied this topic in depth while in high school, as I was a member of the International Baccalaureate program. We spent nearly half of our time studying the Cold War. But today, I will inform you as to why the tension between these two powers was so high during this time period. And in order to do so, we're going to examine three sources of tension which existed. The first being fundamental ideological differences, the second being an arms race, and the third being the superpowers exerted their influence on other international actors. Furthermore, let's examine how the fundamental ideological differences between the US and USSR attributed to a heightening of animosity during the Cold War. So the ideological differences between the two powers really was at the core of the animosity which existed between the two. The USSR was a superpower which really believed in the notion of a variant of Marxism, dubbed Leninism or communism. It really did put an emphasis on the concepts of a market economy, a command market economy, and authoritarianism. A command market economy is an economic system whereby a central decision maker makes all their economic decisions in the greater good of society as a whole. In addition to this, the USSR put heavy emphasis on the importance of a paramilitary vanguard party, which really did further Marxist ideas with a single leader guiding everything. In contrast, the U.S. believes in the concepts of a free market economy and democracy. A free market economy, or capitalism, is an economic system whereby individuals make economic decisions in their own self-interest. In addition to this, the U.S. really does believe that the people should elect representatives to further any potential interests. Moreover, let's examine how the arms race factored into the heightened level of tension between the two powers during the Cold War. The arms race was a major contributing factor as both the U.S. and USSR really had a major stockpile of atomic weapons, and these could have been used at any moment. Interestingly enough, the arms race actually began in Los Alamos during the Manhattan Project. During the Manhattan Project, which took place in the mid-1940s, the Soviet Union sent in spies to take the plans for the atomic bomb and ultimately started producing a line of weapons of their own. This eventually led to a world where both the US and USSR were producing and stockpiling atomic weapons on a seemingly monthly basis. Now, this was incredibly dangerous, as both superpowers really did point these weapons towards one another and made an assortment of threats to actually use them. Moreover, let's examine how the influence of these two countries on an international stage really did heighten the tension as well. Both the US and USSR really made major attempts to exert their ways of life onto foreign international actors. This is evidenced by certain events such as the Korean War. In this particular event, the US really attempted to input its way of life and input its way of thought in the southern part of the peninsula, whereas the USSR did the very same with their way of life in the northern section of the peninsula. And as most of you know, this eventually led to an all-out ideological war which burst out in the early 1950s. Something very similar actually happened with Vietnam as well. The U.S. again attempted to exert its way of life and way of thought in the southern part of the peninsula, whereas the Soviet Union, in coordination with China, attempted to do the same in the north. This, as you know, led to an all-out conflict in the 1960s into the early 1970s. have identified the three main reasons as to why this tension between the US and USSR really was so high during the Cold War. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize how fundamental ideological differences, an arms race, and the attempting of these international actors to exert their ways of life really did lead to the Cold War being a very tenuous event. This tension was so high, the very prospect of an all-out nuclear conflict really was not too far-fetched. Many actually thought that it was going to happen. So, when you wake up in the morning and you look at your ceiling, please be sure to thank your lucky stars that the US and USSR